Hi, thank you for tuning in. I'm here with Dr. James Petrovich, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his research and his time at TCU.
Thanks, Haley.
Tell
I'm
us
glad to
about
be
yourself.
here. Well, I've been here since 2010. I'm an assistant professor over in the Department of Social Work. I teach research methods classes and human behavior classes, and I'm a community researcher and an evaluator, and that's kind of what I do.
So what brought you to TCU?
Well, it's kind of a roundabout way. I was teaching at UTA back in 2010, and I started running into TCU graduates in some of my classes, and I was always very impressed with how prepared they were. I thought they were very competent, very passionate students, and I wanted to know more about this place they were coming from. So I came over, spent some time teaching as an adjunct, and then eventually an opportunity came up to be hired, so I applied, and I was lucky enough to get the job. Yeah.
Well, that's great.
It is great.
So how do you like TCU?
I love TCU. TCU is an awesome place to be. It's exactly the kind of university I wanted to teach at. I knew I didn't want to teach at a big Research One university where I felt like things were more impersonal and faculty were maybe pressured more to conduct research. As much as I love research, teaching is really what I love to do more, and TCU allows me to do that. The emphasis on the teacher-scholar model and all the things you hear about being strong in the classroom and being available for students, I totally buy into that because that's what I want to do anyway.
Right, so how does TCU allow you to, I know you mentioned that you can teach and do research, but how do you do that?
Well, the nice thing is that TCU provides resources that frees up my time. They actually give me a quarter of my time every semester I can spend conducting research projects, and that's what I spend that time doing. I evaluate programs for people who are homeless that are funded by the city of Fort Worth, so that's one way I use that time. I also am helping an organization called the Fort Worth Foundation create a new facility for people who are homeless, and it's going to be about a $12 to $15 million investment. And what they've asked me to do is help them design the facility, think about the services that are going to be offered, even think about how they're going to hire the people who work there, because we know that's really important in serving that population.
And so what will the facility look like? I know you're planning it, sort of.
Well, it's going to be huge. It's going to be about 30,000 square feet. Half of it's going to be dedicated for clinical services, medical, mental health, substance abuse, optometry, and then hearing. And then the other half, the other 15,000 square feet, is going to be for social services like case management and employment training and things like that. And it's going to be located in Fort Worth, where most of the homeless shelters are.
Perfect.
And it's going to be, what we're hoping, is a really great opportunity for folks to get the services they need as quickly as they can get them, so they can move on out and be homeless for the least amount of time possible.
So I'm confused, do they live there?
They do.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Well, not in that facility.
Okay.
This facility is literally across the street from some of the largest, well, it's really across the street from the only shelters in Fort Worth. So there's probably about 1,500 people who live within like a 3-block radius of where this building will be. So it'll be perfectly situated to help those folks.
Right. Have you done any research on the homeless facilities that are across the street from what you're talking about?
I have. Actually, there's an organization called the Presbyterian Night Shelter, and they are what we call a low-demand shelter, which means that there really aren't any requirements to get in and stay the night. And they, on average, take about 800 people a night. And I know.
That's a lot.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually one of the largest shelters of its kind in the country. And I spent time in 2009 conducting a study where I was working to better understand the homeless veterans who lived in that building. Homeless veterans have access to lots of different services funded by the VA and through other kind of entities, but they were still sleeping on the floor of this shelter, and I wanted to understand why that was. So I spent about 6 months collecting data, talking to the veterans who lived there, trying to understand what they needed, how did they end up there in the first place, what we could do to help them get out. And it was a great study. It was funded by the VA, and I think, at least in Fort Worth, it's helped us better understand those folks and how we can help them.
Cool. So how do you apply your research? I mean, I know that it's going towards the new facilities that you were just talking about, but do you apply in other ways as well?
Sure. City of Fort Worth spends about $3 million a year on homelessness services. I know that's not a lot compared to other cities, but What they want to know is are those programs actually working? So I work with some colleagues over at the UNT Health Science Center, and we work to really measure and see if those programs are effective. So if there's a program that's designed to help someone get a job, we want to know if people are getting jobs, and if they're not, what other services do they need that could possibly help them better their chances of getting that job. We also work with providers who actually help people get into housing. And the big thing is getting someone into housing isn't the hard part. Sometimes the issues are helping them stay in housing, because typically they're very poor. Sometimes they have mental health problems, substance abuse problems, so they really need a lot of support. And we want to make sure that the programs that are in place are really offering that support. It's an important job because there's less and less money available for these kinds of services, so we really need to know if what we're doing is effective and if it's efficient. So yeah.
Is what we do. Are we being effective?
We are actually. The services that we're providing in Fort Worth are reaching the outcomes that we set. We're housing the numbers of people we want to house. One program in particular housed 250 people last year. 85 of those people stayed in housing, are still in housing today, which is a really good retention rate. I did another study where I took 85 people and I partnered with John Peter Smith Health Network, which is our local hospital, our local mental health provider, the Fort Worth Police Department, and then our ambulance provider. And what we wanted to do was see how much for these four kind of service providers, how much services did these 85 folks use in the 18 months before they got in housing and the 18 months after they got in housing. And what we found is that money that the city is spending on homelessness is an incredibly effective investment. Those 85 people used about $1.6 million worth of just JPS healthcare services before they went into housing. After they went into housing, they used $600,000 of services. Oh. So we saved $1 million worth of services by helping people get into housing. So there's lots of ways to think about, is what we're doing working? I like to think about it at all levels. I like to think about the client themselves, that person who's living on the streets, helping their life to improve. I like to think about how are we helping the community, because resources are scarce and we don't have money to waste.
Now, I was reading something the other day, and it said that Fort Worth has a plan to, I think, eliminate homelessness. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I can. That's actually, those are actually the programs I evaluate. The plan is called Directions Home, and their kind of slogan is make homelessness rare, short-term, and non-recurring by 2015. Oh. And I'm a part of that plan. I'm funded as the evaluator for all these programs. That was one of the things they built into that plan, was that they were going to have an independent third-party evaluation of all their programs. So that's what I and my colleagues at UNT Health Science Center do.
Right, okay.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Well, to talk a little bit more about TCU, what do you think makes it different from other universities?
I just think that the attention to really helping our students reach their potential. Working at UTA, a large public institution, there was a lot of talk about enrollment and numbers and big classes, and I never really felt like I was able to take the time with the students that I wanted to, or that they might have needed. And so by coming to TCU, I feel like that I'm given that opportunity. I'm encouraged to do it. It doesn't take much encouragement for me. I just want to do it naturally, but I'm given the resources and the time to do it. I think TCU is investing tremendously in the resources that are available for students and faculty. I think we really we know that there's a mark for us to make on our community, and not just Fort Worth, but nationally and globally. And so to do that, we're really putting the money and the time and the energy into really making that happen. And I don't know if that's happening as much at other universities. I think other universities they have their priorities and they have their focus. I just find that I really fit with the values of TCU, and more so, I really believe in the direction that they're going.
Now, can you tell me a little bit more about your teaching style and how you connect with students?
Well, I'm kind of known as Mr. Active in the classroom. For me, I like to be up, I like to be moving, I like to get students engaged. I learn every student's name. I know their names probably by the fourth week. It's just what I call on people. They don't like it. I put them on the spot at times because I just feel like that learning is collaborative. I feel like it's democratic to a degree. It's not for me just to stand in front of the room and just kind of spew information at them that they're just supposed to take in. I want them to question what I say. I want them to think critically about what we talk about. And because I think that's what our mission is ethical leaders and citizens. And so to do that, I mean, they have to be a part of the process. So I really take a lot of time to incorporate active learning into the classroom. I try and do problem-based learning. I have some students right now who are helping me on the project to design the new facility.
Oh, okay.
I spent the money I was given, I spent on hiring students because I think that there's no better way to learn than to get involved. And if we need to figure out how to get information about what works and what doesn't work, I want them to be involved. I think it's great. They seem to be enjoying it, and I think the product will be better for it. It was funny, I showed them a preliminary sketch of the facility, and one of the students, who's also over at Bright Divinity School, said, "I don't see that there's any space for people to pray." And I thought, I never would have thought about that.
That's a good point.
It was a good point. Another person brought up the idea of having a place where people who might be experiencing abuse or victimization of some kind could get away from the masses, the greater group of people. So having more eyes and ears on the project is really working out. So that's it's funny because one of our evaluation questions asks about, is the instructor engaging? Is the instructor active in trying to involve students in the classroom? And I actually scored higher than anyone else in my college on that question, so I take pride in that.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. So I know you talked about how you call on people, which I would hate, but I'm glad you do.
But I would want to hear your opinion.
Right, yeah, because usually I try to speak, but then get nervous, and so I don't.
Okay.
But anyway, so what other ways do you involve active learning?
I love to just do kind of group projects. I teach a lot of theory classes, so part of me says you don't need me to teach you the theory. If you've read and if you've spent the time out of class doing what you need to do, maybe you could teach the class. Maybe a group of you could teach the class. I like to do case studies. I like to do things where they critique each other's work, where I'll have one group, I'll say, I want you to explain Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. And then what I'll do is I'll have the other students not just sit there passively and listen. I'll say, what I want you to do is when we're done, I want you to critique and tell them what they did well, what they didn't do well, what information did they miss. And so we pass it along and try and give everybody a chance to take different roles in the class, because I think students are educators and educators are learners, or educator as in me. So the more I can kind of flip those roles at times, I think, and put the responsibility on the students, I think that just benefits them. So you don't want to take one of my classes, is what I'm doing.
Well, I think I would like it, but but I would be a little nervous at first.
You'd get over it quick, don't
I
you?
hope so. So I know you're very involved in the community, and can you tell me a little bit more about what you're doing?
Well, in addition to the foundation project and the evaluation for the city, I do a lot of stuff, honestly. It's a long list, but I just feel like that to really be a good community partner, we have to be in our community. I mean, TCU has so many resources. We have so much expertise and knowledge. To not be sharing that in the broader community, I feel like we wouldn't be fulfilling our mission. So I work with Catholic Charities of Fort Worth. They have a street outreach team that goes out into Fort Worth at night and tries to engage or connect with people who are homeless. I work with them. I work as a technical kind of advisor, but then I also actually go out and do the work itself. I feel like that's really important because I need to stay connected to what I'm teaching.
Right.
If I haven't practiced, so to speak, in 15 years, We know things change over time. Homelessness today is not what it was 10 years ago, so I do that. I'm also on a number of boards and committees. I help make funding decisions in Fort Worth. Just last week, Tuesday, helped to distribute $11 million worth of federal funding to different agencies in the community. I work with the VA still. I help them with the street outreach program that they're developing. And wherever possible, I try and lend a hand with agencies. I feel like my investment in homelessness, my efforts to understand it, have somewhat positioned me as an expert in the community, especially for Fort Worth. And I feel like that people are coming to me. They're asking me for help. They're asking me for advice. So I feel like I absolutely want to respond and to do what I can to help them. But also at the same time, I want to involve my students as well, because I think they need to see I model something to them. I mean, I represent the profession of social work, so I want to show them what I think social work is, which is being in the community, being involved, and trying to make a difference.
Do your students go out into the community with you?
They will, yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. I often take them on tours of the area I talked about before, where all the shelters are located. We use that tour is really built around understanding the social environment and how it impacts people. The students I talked about working on the project with me, just any opportunity I have to try and to bring students, get them into the community to where they can see these things happening, I think that's beneficial.
On your tours with students, do you like talk to homeless people and try to engage them, like you said, for the Catholic Charities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And can you kind of describe what those conversations go like?
Sure. A lot of them are just around. One thing I know about TCU students is they are very socially aware. I never have to educate students that there are things happening in the world that we need to try and fix. So many of them are so much more involved than I was at their age. They've seen so much more than I ever saw at their age. What I want to try and do is help them focus that passion. And for the students who end up really being interested in homelessness, I want to get them involved. What I try and do in those conversations is just get a dialogue going. I think at that point, when students are talking with clients or people experiencing homelessness, there's a real learning opportunity there, actually on both sides. So what I try and do is step back and get out of the way and just let something natural happen. There's an agency in town, and every fourth Thursday they turn their facility into a jazz club. And it's down in that area. It's they call it the Cypress Street Cafe. So a couple months ago, I took one of my classes down there, and I said, here's a unique way of trying to reintegrate some of our most socially isolated citizens into our community, is create a sense of normalcy around something they don't see all the time, but that you or I could go do pretty much whenever we want. And so we went down there, and it was so interesting to see 12 TCU students in a room with about 150 long-term, hardcore, pardon the expression, people who are homeless. And there was at first this kind of hesitancy on the part of the students, I think. They didn't know what to do. The next thing you know, our time came to leave, and I was having to pull them away from conversations and say, come on, we've got to go. So it just shows me that given the opportunity, our students, they rise to the occasion every time.
That's fantastic. Can you tell me maybe about the last conversation that you had when you went out on the Catholic Charities event, or something else like that, where you did engage with clients? Sure. Yeah,
I met a guy. First name was Kenneth. He was a older black gentleman. He was living behind a gas station, and myself and the other outreach worker I was with, he knew him. Jay, the other outreach worker, knew Kenneth, and we came upon him, and he was just sitting kind of on the side of the building, and he's 65 years old or maybe older, and we just started talking about, he's been on the streets for a long time. He's had offers to try and help him find housing. He's got a pretty bad substance abuse problem. And so what we try and do whenever we run into those folks is just reaffirm to them that we're here, we're going to keep showing up. we're not going to try and force him to do anything, and if he refuses our help, we're not going to kind of disown him, which I think is reassuring to him. A lot of folks have been disappointed by service providers in the past. They don't live up to what they say they're going to do. So what we want to do is try and be encouraging and be trustworthy. We try and start with the small things. Can I get you this? Can I get you that? Have you lost your birth certificate? I mean, everything. It's funny how things that you or I probably take for granted, things that you or I could probably go put our hand on in a second, if we need to go get our driver's license. Yeah, I know where my birth certificate is. If you're living behind a gas station, sometimes that's hard to do. Kenneth is also, he's diabetic. He's had one of his feet partially amputated, so he's on crutches. So he's got kind of lingering stuff, and then he's got ongoing medical issues, so we're always checking in to see how he's doing. Does he have his insulin? Does he have syringes? Does he have glucometer strips? I mean, really basic stuff that when you live at home, those things aren't really as much of a concern.
Right.
But when you're out on the streets, does he feel like he's at risk of being victimized? I mean, lots of things are happening. So what we know from the research is that the best way to try and engage with folks who have been out on the streets for a long time is to really demonstrate a sincere interest in helping them, to be true to what you say you're going to do, and to just keep coming back. And it may take a while, it may take years, in fact, but progress will be made. And I think there are several reasons why it's important, because people say, well, gosh, there's lots of people who need help. Why are we spending all this time on this guy? Well, Kenneth uses a lot of services. He goes to the emergency room a lot, so the sooner we can get him off the streets, the better. There's also just the idea that he's a human being, and I don't think that we should ever necessarily just kind of give up on people. It may take time, it may take a lot more time than we hope or think, but that's the time it takes.
Are you able to use examples like that in the classroom, because you do have more real world experience?
I do, and I think the students love it. I mean, I spent 15 years as a substance abuse counselor, so when I draw on those experiences, some of the time I was working in that field, I worked with youth in Montana. We would take them on camping trips. I ran a ropes course, challenge course, where people were, problem-solving activities and things like that. So I think the students like hearing it. It gives them a way to connect the theoretical and the abstract with something that's practical and real. And so I try and do that, whether it's my own examples in the classroom or by taking them into the community. I really think a big part of learning is making that connection. And if I can't help them make that, I'm not sure how much they're learning.
Right. Now, this is a little off topic, but I know that you're very interested in homeless veterans.
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell me a little bit about how that started?
Well, I lived in New York City for a while, and I worked at a facility where people who were homeless, they came to live. It was funded through the federal government, state and city governments actually as well. And I started running into veterans, and my father's a veteran, and he was a career military, 25 years, and I kept thinking, how did these men take these trajectories, whereas somebody like my father or other people that I've seen, how did they end up taking this different path in life? So really I started talking to the folks I worked with and just started hearing that, the military was kind of a safe place for a while. A lot of them, before they even entered the military, were already struggling economically. They came from poor neighborhoods, from poor cities, from poor neighborhoods. A lot of them were struggling with mental health challenges that really the military kind of gave them a place with a lot of structure, and it gave them a purpose and a way to kind of just know every day what to do. But when they left the military, things really fell apart.
Right.
I just think that anyone who served our country should not be sleeping on the street. So really that's what's kind of motivated me over the years to, as a practitioner, stay involved with the issue, but also just as a researcher, try and figure out, what does it take? I mean, 55,000 veterans will spend the night homeless tonight, and that's just unacceptable. So we have to figure out, what are we going to do to try and make that happen? We put a lot of money into it. We need to figure out what works, what doesn't work, what's efficient, what's not. And that's a population that I'll continue to work to help if I can.
Have you been able to involve your students? I know there are a lot of veterans at TCU. Do you involve them in this as well?
I try to. There's actually one of my connections, one of my agency connections, we're able to use that facility as a field placement. Social workers, they do internships when they're in school, and one of our student veterans is actually working in this homeless shelter, and so that's one way I try and get them connected. And then I also just try and help them. I don't work for the VA, but I still hold a position at the VA, and so what I also try and do is just help graduates kind of navigate that system. There's a lot to getting a job at the VA. I use whatever contacts or knowledge I have to kind of help my students get there. And as other opportunities come up, I always want to involve students where I can.
Well, so what position do you hold at the VA?
I work in the mental health department under a researcher who's been a mentor of mine for years. I'm a research coordinator. It's an unpaid position. What we do is I help her with studies that she's working on. We also write and publish together, and there's a outreach effort that they're starting, and I'm helping to kind of advise that. So
okay, that's really interesting. Now, I know TCU's mission, it means a lot to you.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you support that mission?
Well, I think we talk a lot about critical thinking at TCU. We talk about being a good citizen. We talk about the global community, talk about being a leader. And I think that those things absolutely can be abstract, and they can be very theoretical and hypothetical, or we can make them real. And what I try and do is try and make them very real, and I try and encourage my students to think critically about the issues around them. It doesn't matter if you're a major social work or not. I want you to think about what you believe. I want you to question the information that you're being given. I want you to develop your own opinion. I want it to be an informed opinion. I don't want it to just be based on opinion or intuition. I think that's a part of being a good citizen. And as far as being a leader, what I see in TCU students is leadership capabilities. I see the potential to be those leaders. So I want them to challenge themselves, to go into the community, to tackle the hard problems, to be out front in front of these issues, to leverage the resources that they have. Students come to TCU very prepared. They've experienced a lot, they've seen a lot. How can I help them build on that and become the person that they want to be?
So I know earlier you were talking about the jazz club that you took students
Mm-hmm.
to. Do they do that voluntarily, or is it for a class?
It was actually for a class. It was for my human behavior theory class, and the goal was kind of the point is that if people are only surrounded by people who are like them, it's really hard to see beyond that. And so it's really hard to see yourself being different if you don't have an example in front of you. It's kind of basic social learning. And so what I wanted to do was take them down and see and show them an effort by the community to try and bring in others who could provide an example. Because, probably need to qualify, we were there. There were also other community members.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
There's a church from Dallas. They come regularly. And so one of their things is that they serve the refreshments, and then they interact with folks. They actually, though, surprisingly, kind of stayed more to their jobs necessarily. When we came, it was interesting because our students really were much more proactive about getting out there and really starting relationships. And it's funny, and I've seen this on many occasions, it's funny how the people who are homeless or experiencing homeless, they meet these students and they get so excited to hear about what our students are doing. They're like, oh, you're doing this, or you're majoring in that, or something else. And without fail, like, the final words will always be, you study hard now. And part of it will always be like, not kind of what I was thinking I wanted to see. I was looking to see more of like encouragement from the student to the other person.
Right.
But I think that happens anyway. So I think to me it's just an interesting experiment in bringing two pretty different groups of people together and seeing some magic happen, basically.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. So this happens every fourth Thursday.
It does.
And so more people come from the community than just TCU students.
Exactly.
And do you frequently bring TCU students, or is this just the one time
This was the
thing?
first time.
Oh, okay.
This was it. I've wanted to do it in the past. I had a smaller graduate class that I could take down there. I only had 12 students in the class, and that's one nice thing about small class sizes is that we can get out into the community a lot easier. I've also, whenever I'm trying to do tours or taking folks out and about, when there's smaller numbers, just make it easier to manage.
Do students frequently come to you and ask if you can show them around the community and kind of help
It's
them
happened.
out?
Yeah, a lot of folks, TCU students are very, like I said, socially aware, and they love to volunteer. And so I'll have lots of folks who aren't social work majors, but will take a class of mine, so they'll learn about my interest in the area, and they'll come to me later and they'll say, I'm really interested in working with children, or I really want to work with veterans, or I'm interested in working with older adults or something. Can you help me find a place where I could do some volunteer work? And I will, I'll point them in that direction if I can.
Well, that's great. So people from other majors?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. I really love for my classes to be, I guess, interdisciplinary. My human behavior theory class is also a required class in the child development major.
Oh, okay.
So I get a lot of child development majors. I get a lot of general studies majors. I really like my door to be open, so to speak, because I think the life experience that they bring, the conversations, the perspectives, the opinions, it just makes for a much richer experience.
Okay, now we've talked a lot about how you've had the effect, or you've affected students, but how have students affected you?
I really think they keep me young, honestly. Like I said, I just turned 45 yesterday, but I don't feel, at times I don't feel much older than my students, I think, because their energy, their enthusiasm, their passion for these issues, their desire to really find something that's important and attach themselves to it, that's something that I want to do. It's something that I continue to try and do. So I guess in a way, I see a reflection of myself in them. I think that their energy level, just their enthusiasm, I learned a lot about the students today are very different than I was at their age, 30 years ago or however many. I think the world that y'all grow up in is quite different. The way you see the world is quite different as well. Just technology, the way that we talk and act and group together it's quite different than what I grew up with. So it's always fascinating, and I learn a lot from seeing the kind of the way things have changed, and it's a very diverse environment that we live in, and I think the students today are handling so much more than I was ever asked to handle when I was your age. I mean, the amount of information, and honestly, the amount of work that y'all do now is incredible. And so I learn a lot, and I want to be supportive.
Do they kind of almost like help your passion kind of grow because you see them and like they have a new energy, and I can see like kind of getting tired or something and then being like, oh.
It absolutely does. I've done a lot, seen a lot as a professional, and so I think it's easy at times to forget that things are changing constantly, and that every single client is very different than the next. So it's very helpful for when students kind of help bring me back down to earth. One of the things I think that's really important in the classroom is I don't create this crazy hierarchy. It's not about I'm up here and you're down here. Like I said, I mean, democratic or equal. And so thinking about being educated about how my perspective on an issue, as informed as I might think I am, I may be missing something. It's not beyond the realm of possibilities. So absolutely, I mean, students, I get more from my interactions with students than I think students get from me. I think they get a lot from me, believe me, but I think that I get a lot more.
How do you create the democratic kind of atmosphere in your classroom?
I come in with high expectations. I don't dumb it down. I think that models to them that I believe that they can rise to the standard and that I expect them to. I don't work any harder than they do. And I do that purposefully, not because I don't want to work. I love to work and I work a lot, but I just think it's important that students get the message, whether it's explicit or whether it's more implied through my actions, that I want them to meet me at a point. And it's actually required. An effective learning environment cannot occur when it's just a one-way relationship. I cannot just talk at you and think that you're going to learn. There has to be a response. There has to be a dialogue. There has to be a real discussion around the issues that we're talking about. And I expect my students to participate in that. And so I think that is how you create that kind of environment. And it is challenging because I think students today, at times, they want to learn more passively for whatever reason. I personally, and the research backs it up, is that active learning is the more effective approach. So much to their dismay, 9 o'clock class, I'm going to call on them and expect to hear an informed opinion about the information that we're talking about. So.
Okay, well, geez, that sounds awesome.
You can register for my class next semester.
Yes, I will. And so, how do students feel about this? I mean, I would like it, so they must like it too.
I think they do. I really do. I take their feedback. I listen to their feedback. I solicit their feedback. I don't just wait for the course end evaluation. We do midterm evaluations. I check in with students. Fundamentally, y'all are paying an incredible amount of money to come to this institution. Fundamentally, I believe you need to get every dollar's worth. And it's not just about the best facilities, the nicest dining halls, the greatest residence halls. All that is to sustain you while you're here learning. So my role, my responsibility is to make sure you get that to the greatest extent that I can. And so that's what I work towards. And that's kind of my thing, you know. I paid a lot for my education, and I feel most of the time that I got what I needed out of it. I want to make sure that y'all get what you're paying for as well.
I know a lot of faculty does kind of a similar thing to you, but different sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And do you find that your teaching style is similar to a lot of people in your department, or?
I think it can be. I think we're being encouraged, and I think rightly so, to be more active, to use more problem-based learning, to use more group-based learning strategies. I think it's something I gravitate towards naturally. I think as an institution, the TCU is providing us with the facilities we need to better do that. I mean, classrooms that have movable tables or walls that we can write on, or the technology is better. I think those are there not to replace a quality educator, but it's to improve what we're able to do. And so, you know, as a faculty member, I think with all these things available to me, I absolutely want to maximize them. And I think all the other faculty are as well. It's a challenge. It makes our jobs more difficult. We have to rethink how we were doing things. Sometimes we have to reconfigure whole classes. But I think that if that helps the student have a better experience, then that's what we're going to do.
Now, you talked a little bit about this research into active learning and how you've incorporated it into your teaching style.
Mm-hmm.
But can you explain to me a little more of the research that's been done
On the active learning?
on the active learning and how you've incorporated it?
Well, I think it's just, we know there are different ways that people learn. It's the old visual, kinesthetic, auditory. And so to just do one thing in the classroom is not going to work. What we need to do is we need to touch on everyone's style. And a lot of times people are a mix of one or the other, or a couple things. And so to go in and to really try and cater to these different styles and try and cater to these different learning needs is really, it's one of the greatest challenges an educator will take on if they choose to take it on. Now, I could walk into a classroom and stand there with my notebook and just read my notes and drone on in a lecture style. I think people have done that for years, and people probably unfortunately still do it. But I think as we better understand how diverse people are, how they think differently, the process of learning itself, we learn more and more every year. We have to cater to that, and we have to respond to that. So that's what we're going to do.
Okay, well, that's great. Well, it's been great talking with you.
Great.
And I hope you tune in for our other webcasts.
Thank you. It's been great to be here.